There are places that do not want to be found. You can feel it in the way the wind dies when you approach, in the way the shadows stretch longer than they should, and in the silence that follows every strike of the shovel. We were 4 weeks into the excavation when we found the sealed door. Voskova Hill was supposed to be a minor site, an unremarkable mound forgotten by time and bureaucracy, nestled in the shadow of the Staroshev Mountains. The locals refused to come near it. They called it Dolina Šapatā, the Whispering Hollow. Nico, our hired guide, hadn't spoken a word since we arrived. He simply pointed toward the hill that morning and made a sign with his fingers, 3 lines across his chest, like an inverted trident. Carla said it was an old warding gesture. Luis called it superstition. I wasn't sure. We dug for weeks, pottery shards, bone fragments, a few inscriptions, nothing groundbreaking. Until the morning of the 27th day, when Luis's pickaxe hit something hollow. We cleared the earth slowly. Beneath the packed soil was a stone slab, darker than the surrounding rock, smooth as glass. No seams, no hinges. Only a circular symbol carved into the center, a single eye, wide open, surrounded by flame-like etchings. Carla ran her fingers over it. "Not Roman," she whispered. "Not Greek, not anything I've seen." We should have stopped, documented it, covered it, informed the Institute. But the symbol was looking at us. That night, while Luis and Carla cataloged the find, I couldn't sleep. My tent felt colder than usual. The wind outside whispered, too rhythmically to be natural. Nico sat alone by the fire, rocking slightly, muttering in his own tongue. I thought I heard the word Zora, darkness or dawn. I wasn't sure which. At 3:17 a.m., my watch stopped ticking. That's when I heard it. Faint below the ground. Not a voice, not breathing. A heartbeat from beneath the hill. The next morning, when we landed at the excavation site, the silence in the air was more intense. It was as if we were under the ground, not above it, and we didn't realize it. There were no birds. Even the wind seemed to have gone in another direction. And the stone lid, it was still wet where it had been. Luis was the first to notice. "Did it rain during the night?" he asked. It hadn't. There wasn't even any moisture in the air. But the stone shone like a freshly dug tombstone. And the eye symbol on it, it seemed to have opened a little wider. This time Carla leaned over the edge of the stone. She put on gloves before running her fingers over the inscriptions. She always did that. "Some languages are read with the skin, not the voice," she said. That morning, a scratch on the edge of the stone caught his attention. At first he thought it was a random crack, but no, it was a word, written in an old, forgotten dialect. "Leave me alone." Of course we didn't. At noon that day, we called in 2 more members of the excavation team, Marta, the technical expert, and Pavel, the young geologist. But Nico, without saying anything, he packed his things and started walking up the mountain. No goodbye, no explanation. He just left. Carla shouted after him, but he didn't even look back. Luis joked, "Nico must have sensed something bad was going to happen in the documentary." We laughed. It was nerves. We carefully cleared the soil around the stone cap until the afternoon. It was deeper than we had expected. It was in the middle of a circle that went down about 1.5 meters. The ground around it was different, not natural, but built of stones placed there. It was as if the lid was the mouth of a room, or a cellar. As darkness approached, the stone began to heat up. Indeed, Luis's thermal device showed the surface of the stone lid at 38 degrees. The perimeter was 22 degrees. There could be hot air trapped inside, Carla said. But her voice was shaking. I suggested we wait for the night. But Marta, Marta didn't want to wait. She took the digging lamp, fixed the rope, and leaned into the circle. "If this is not a tomb," she said, "perhaps it is a place of worship. Eye symbols don't always represent divinity. Sometimes they mean surveillance. Maybe it's not us, but something outside of us watching us behind this stone." And then he lowered his lamp and touched the lid for the first time. The stone trembled slightly. From inside, there was a metal sound, the sound of a chain, a crawling chain. The snow retreated. I was petrified. Luis swore. Marta whispered, "There's someone inside." That night, we pitched our tents away from the circle. It sounds logical, but let me be honest, we were all scared. And that fear was more real than scientific curiosity. Because science demands explanations, but the thing inside us was looking for a place to escape. Marta said she wanted to wait by the stone hatch until morning. "Maybe someone is trapped inside," she said. Carla warned her sternly. "No one is trapped in a room that has been sealed for thousands of years, Marta. It was deliberately sealed." Luis was silent. For the first time, I was about to return to the tent when one of the lamps went out by itself, then another one, and then a third. There was no electricity, no wind, just silence. Carla turned on her pocket flashlight and looked toward the circle. The surface of the stone lid was fogged, as if it had been breathed through. And the pupil of the symbol, that deepest point of the carved stone, was slightly damp, or sweat. It was 2:19 a.m. Luis suddenly shouted, "I've got a tape recorder." We rushed to the tape recorder on the camp table. Marta put on the headphones, then her face paled. "Listen," she said. We all put our ears to the device in turn. There was a scratchy, muffled recording, but the sound was clear. "Are you looking?" A man's voice, neither old nor young, but he spoke as if he had dirt in his throat. Carla swallowed as I held my heart. "That can't be an echo of a voice inside," she said. "The lid is not thin enough to pass sound. It's something else." Before sunrise that morning, we decided to sprinkle salt around the stone lid. It sounded absurd, yes, but logic had already gotten away from us. Carla took a large notebook with her and tried to draw symbols and come up with solutions. "This is not a warning," she often said to herself. "It is like a prayer waiting, a prayer hoping to be answered." And at 6:33 in the morning, Luis suddenly entered the tent shouting. His eyes were bloodshot. "The stone is open!" We rushed there. The stone was still there, but there was a thin crack in the center. The eye symbol was split right down the middle. And Carla, looking down through the crack, could only say one sentence. "There is no room there. There is a descent." The silence that followed the crack was different from the silences we had heard before. This time it had a weight. It was as if the world had held its breath. The sun didn't rise that morning. At least that's how it felt. The sky was turning from gray to dark. The air was getting thicker. He looked down through the snow crack. He dangled the lamp slightly, but the light didn't hit anything. The light was swallowed up. "It's empty," he said in a low voice. "Really empty." Luis began to prepare the technical rope system. "First, we have to take measurements," Marta insisted, but there was curiosity in her eyes too. And I felt something stirring inside me. Not logic, not science, not human impulse. Something more primitive. Something was calling from below, and we didn't know its name, but we recognized its voice. Marta was the first one down. She descended about 12 meters on a rope. "There are no stone walls," she said, "but the surface is not smooth. It's like I'm inside a living tissue." It took us a second to realize he was serious. 1 minute passed, then 2. The radio went silent. Luis immediately started the descent, then me. When I went down, my feet didn't touch the ground. The rope was stabilizing me, but the surroundings were empty. I shone my lamp left and right. There were no walls, no surface, but there was a feeling of breathing. It was as if the void we were in was slowly sucking each of us in, learning something about us. Carla came down last. "This is not a room," she said. "It's like a mind." And then one of the lamps went out by itself. Then the other one. We were not left in darkness because a glow rose from below, a glow in the shape of an eye. It was almost 3 meters in diameter and matched the symbol on the cracked stone lid. But it was not stone. The eye moved its eyelid slightly. Carla held her breath. Marta began to pray. Luis didn't scream, but I did, because the eye wasn't above us. It was under us, and it was watching us. After we went down into the pit that night, the concept of the clock disappeared. I don't remember when we came back up, only that Carla's ankles were covered in blood, and Marta said that her feet were not stepping in mud, but in wet skin. When we got back to the camp, Nico's things were still there, but Nico was gone. No, he hadn't. He was never gone. He was in his tent. His back was to us. He looked like he was sleeping, but his skin was cold, and his eyes were open. He had a rusted coin in his mouth. Luis was about to throw up. Carla closed her eyes and whispered only one sentence. We're all inside her now. The next morning, we watched the CCTV footage. The moments when we went down into the pit that night were recorded, but there's a moment when all of our faces are blurred, not pixels, like a deliberate erasure, as if the camera didn't recognize us. In those moments, there was another figure in the depths behind us. A silhouette. He was standing, a pointed stone helmet on his head. It had no eyes, but you could still feel it looking. It's a priest, Marta said. It's a guard, or a gatekeeper. During that day, the earth around the stone lid moved. Yes, it did. It heaved and cracked on its own. It's not something coming from inside. It's the breath of something trying to get out. Luis started to salt the area. He studied the old inscriptions with the snow. And for the first time, I thought, maybe this discovery is not ours, but his coming to us. Carla showed me notes she had translated from an ancient tablet. She could understand only 3 words. Don't sleep. Do not know your name. Observe. Marta couldn't close her eyes that night, not out of fear. She said that when she closed them, she began to hear her name. She claimed that one by one, everyone would hear her voice. I was the first, she said, crying. And at 4:12 a.m., on the ground in the center of the camp, another eye shape was drawn. No one had drawn it, but the earth had heaved itself into that shape. That morning, Marta had taped her eyelids. Not real tape. She had wrapped pieces of old cloth around her eyes and poured salt on them. I won't see, she said. I won't show myself to him. Luis didn't speak anymore. He had a stone in his mouth. Yes, a real stone. Small, round, cold. He chewed and chewed, as if without it his tongue would run away. Carla kept translating the old cuneiform, but her hands were shaking. This is not a curse, she said one night. It is a contract between humanity and her, a contract sealed so that it cannot be awakened. But we didn't just touch the sealed door, we looked inside. That night, cameras around the camp took a recording. There was no one in the video. But the shadows of the trees moved, not with the wind. They were silhouettes that didn't belong in the shadows, moving like bodies. One was clearly walking towards our tents. The silhouette had no head, only a long neck and a glowing eye in the center of its chest. And then The image was of us when we should have been asleep. But we were coming out of the tents, walking around. We all had our eyes closed, and dust was falling out of our mouths. The next morning, Carla's notebook was missing. But instead, someone had left a scroll on the camp table, an old scroll, and in the center of that writing were all our names. Mine, Carla's, Luis's, Marta's, and at the bottom, the same symbol as the stone eye we found at the dig site. Marta didn't speak anymore. She just mumbled, "He saw us. He counted us. He learned about us." That night, the sky was starless. There was no moon, but it was still bright in the center of the camp. There was a shapeless light that started to burn by itself. And we couldn't close our eyes. When we returned to the dig site, nothing was the same. The map didn't match. The soil was soft, but it couldn't be dug. It was as if there was an organism underneath, an entity that was uncomfortable with us, but had not yet acted. Luis burned the journals from the excavation center. "If we forget, we'll be saved," he said. But Marta shook her head. "He knows how to forget," she said. "He is the forgotten things themselves." Carla was the first to get lost in the tunnels that day. We were all in the same tunnel, tied to the same rope, but there came a moment when the end of the rope touched only stone, and Carla's voice suddenly came, not from a cave, but from a muffled, underwater depth. "I'm not here," she was saying. "I'm in the stone, and the stone remembered me." Luis shouted. He ran to reach it, but the tunnel suddenly turned. Yes, it literally changed direction. The road, which had been straight a moment ago, took a curve, right in front of our eyes. The stone moved. The rock had veins. It contracted like flesh. That's when I realized we didn't uncover this structure. We stepped on the nerve end of a living being. "The tunnels we passed through are its veins," Marta said. "This is not a structure. This is an illusion built to cover a body. The stone is like the skin of this being, and now it remembers everything we touch." As night fell, we returned to the campsite. But it was no longer our camp. Our tents were still there, but they were empty. Each of our belongings was carefully arranged on the ground. Shoes turned inside out, clothes folded in the shape of our bodies. It was as if we had disappeared and only our molds remained. Marta sat down, put her hands over her face, and was silent for the first time. Luis knelt down and started digging in the dirt. "It's going," he said. "Erased by the snow, even from my memory." I thought too. I tried to visualize his face, but it was blurry, just a figure. And his name was missing. And then, above the ground, in that hole we all dug with our hands, Carla's voice was heard. But it didn't come out of her mouth. It was like a thought from beneath the earth. When Marta woke up that morning, she didn't remember her name, her own name. "It feels like a label," she said. "Like this word doesn't belong to me, as if I was someone else once. But that someone is already here." Luis didn't speak anymore. His tongue is there, but the words don't come out. He seems to be mumbling something in his mouth all the time, but it doesn't make sense. It's like a language living in the stone, sounds frictionally swirling. I can still write. These words are mine, for now. But at night, a voice came from the tunnel. Carla's voice. No, it wasn't her voice, but her reflection in our memory. "I began to bear their names," she was saying. "Now they are mine, and you belong to me. The camp is no longer fixed. At night, the tents move. Camera footage proves it. One night a tent is in the north, the next morning it's in the east. The things inside are still in the same places, but the outside world rotates. It's as if we're stuck in a maze, and we're wandering in the middle of a pattern without realizing it." Luis had bitten off his fingernails one morning. "I don't know why," he said. But he didn't want them. They didn't belong in his order. And then the parchment came back, the paper with our names on it. This time there was only one line. The last one left is the eye. Marta no longer sleeps at night. Her eyes are red. But worst of all, even if she doesn't sleep, she dreams. And one night, we locked eyes with her. "You weren't in my dream," Marta said, "because you were already in it." That night, I watched the recording. A drone camera looking down on the camp from above. As we walked between the tents, the earth on the ground was changing shape. Slowly, patiently, the form of an eye was being drawn, but this time, open, not to look into, to watch. That morning, Marta wasn't crying because she had no eyes. She was standing still breathing, but in place of her eyes there was only a thin layer of stone. It was as if from night to morning, a pair of eyes had been resealed. Luis went to the center of the excavation site, the deepest part of the tunnel. In his pocket he carried an old antique, a cross from his mother. He nailed it to the wall of the tunnel. "To remember us," he said. "Whatever's in there, don't let it forget us, because if he does, then we're all his." I kept writing. I could only write now. Conversations became meaningless. Voices slipped away. Words were the last tool I had as time unraveled. But the pages began to change on their own. This morning I couldn't remember the lines I had written yesterday. They hadn't been erased. They had been rewritten. And each new line seemed to come from someone else's hand. When night fell, there were only 3 of us. Me, Marta, without eyes, pretending to be someone who could hear, and Luis. But that night the camp was quiet. There was no wind, no birds. The earth was listening. And then, the sound came, not from outside, not from inside us, from beneath us. The excavation site breathed. The earth rose, the stones trembled, the tunnels contracted and expanded like the lungs of an animal. And that's when I realized we were not at an excavation site. We were in a memory imprisoned in stone, forgotten by time, but now remembered again. And we are no longer just invaders for him. We are fragments of his memories. The camp was silent. Not only was there no wind, there was no sound of being. Everything was empty. But we were still there. Luis prayed for the last time in the morning. It was a prayer he whispered to himself in no particular language. Then he stood up and walked into the tunnel. And he didn't look back. Marta sat quietly, buried her face in the earth. She didn't speak. She didn't move. It became part of the stone. And I kept writing, because there was nothing else left. The cameras were still rolling. Fixed lenses surrounding the entire excavation site. Cold lenses that document every night, every silence, every disappearance. One of them, it was pulling me. I was sitting inside the tent, my eyes open, but empty. I had a notebook in my hand, but the pages were blank, and the camera slowly focused. When the image becomes clear, on the first page of the notebook was a single sentence. "Who will remember me?" The recording continued. Hours, days passed. The camp remained in place. Tents, equipment, notebooks, clothes, everything was there. But we weren't there. None of our bodies were found. Only the recordings remained. And in those images, a repeating pattern. Every night at the same time, someone walks past the cameras. A silhouette. A single eye in the center of his neck, glowing like a stone. And whoever is watching those camera recordings now, they are next.